Our scripture reading is Romans chapter 13, verses 8 through 10. We'll be reading from the English Standard Version. Owe no one anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. There's a concept that we learn from the story of creation, and that is that we were made by God to be stewards of what He creates. Our primary job is being a steward of what God has given to us in our possession. You know, we mess things up when we see ourselves as the owner or the creator of something, but when we see ourselves as the steward, we do those things properly. We are called to steward our money, our time, and our abilities. And these all have something in common. They are under our control. But tonight I want to talk to you about something different. That's stewarding our relationships. This is different because the gift or the resource, so to speak, is alive, it's dynamic, and it's out of our control. Let's start by defining stewardship. Stewardship is guarding and growing fellowship with those at different levels of intimacy by the means of selfless love for the purpose of mutual edification. Tonight, what I want to do is look at the people, the key principles, the ultimate principle, and the power it takes to steward. Let's start with the people. Who are the people that you're supposed to steward relationships with? If you're a social butterfly, most likely it's less people than you really think. And if you're a pretty shy person, you're probably supposed to steward more than what you want. In light of the recent explosion of friendships that we call them that we've made on the internet through things like Instagram and Facebook and social media sites like that, it was in October of 2014, a lady named Maria Konnikova wrote an interesting piece for The New Yorker entitled "The Limits of Friendship." And she references the work done by anthropologist and psychologist Robin Dunbar. So Dunbar decided to focus his research on the grooming habits of primates, specifically why they spent so much time grooming each other. To make a long story short, this led him to investigate the relationships of the brain size to the group size that you live in, which then led him to investigate this in humans. And so he had years and years of research that led him to this conclusion that humans have limits to the amount of people that they can relate to. His conclusion was that humans can only have the capacity to know about 150 people well, meaning their names, their family situation, the current job or life status that they have, major events in their life. It then begins to scale down into groups of 50, and then 12 to 15 people that really their death would devastate you, and then finally 3 to 5 people who are your closest friends. And the point is this: you have levels of relationships and limits to relationships. You can't steward an intimate and close relationship with every person you meet, but you do need to be stewarding some of those relationships. What's interesting about Dunbar's research is that these figures match the life of Jesus really well. He had his inner circle of Peter, James, and John, 3. Then he had 12, 9 others that followed with him called apostles. Then there's about 70 or 72 people that ministered on mission with him, and ultimately about 120 people that followed him. Matches Dunbar's numbers pretty closely. It suggests that this number that Dunbar found was probably something innate in us that really revolves around how we build healthy relationships. So who are the people that we should be stewarding our relationships with? Well, let's begin first of all with those closest to you. And this means not everybody that's in close to you, but usually that's where you start. Mobility in our world has tempted us to ignore the people who live nearest to us. It promises us this false idea that we can just move around and find people that we like the most and ignore the people that are maybe closest to us. It ignores the principle that God has placed us in situations and circumstances. God has put us where He has us to relate to the people that we are around. I believe there are 3 key areas for Christians to consider when building out their relationships. 3 places. The first one is with your family. Spouses, parents, grandparents, siblings, children. Ephesians 5 and Colossians 3 tell us how to invest into these family relationships and nurture them the right way. I would also encourage you to look at your church family, that the family of the people of God are a body, that they are meant to be woven together and intermingle in their lives together. And that place, even if it's not a place you're strongly connected yet, I would encourage you to really focus on that relationship and grow that relationship as best you can. I would also encourage you to look into your community, your close friends, the people you work with, your neighbors, even the non-Christians around you. Colossians 4, Paul tells us to be prayerful about those situations because we may be able to share the gospel with those around us. Now let's move to some key principles about how to steward relationships. There's two really basic principles from the beginning. Principle one is ownership. God owns it because he made it. The second principle is responsibility. He told Adam and Eve to tend and to keep, which means to protect and then to cultivate. The people that are in your life belong to God. You and I are not responsible for these people, but we are responsible for the relationship and the way that we interact in that relationship. So lists abound over and over about how to grow good relationships. You can get on the internet and find all kinds of lists, but I want to turn to Jesus and look how he built these relationships. There's two things we learn from Jesus in John chapter 1 in verse 17. He tells us there that he came bringing grace and truth. Let's start first of all with grace. See, when two sinful people get together into a relationship, it's always going to require grace. We must be ready to extend understanding and patience and mercy and forgiveness. Grace is the only way we relate to God, and it's the only way we're ever going to be able to sustain a proper relationship in our life. Ephesians 4:32 says that we should forgive others in the same way that God has forgiven us. If you think you can have a relationship in this world with another human being without grace, it's not going to happen. So grace is the first principle that it takes to have a good relationship, to steward it well, but it's also truth. Truth in a relationship is the only pathway for real growth. Having integrity in our relationships is difficult, but it's an act of love. And it gives the person that you're relating to an accurate picture for them to respond to. If you are hurt, frustrated, concerned, communicating truthfully to that person gives them an accurate picture to respond to. And if you don't, you're not growing a true relationship, but a false relationship. Let me give you a side note on this as well. Being honest with somebody is different than just, quote, telling it like it is out of frustration. The root word of honesty is the word honor. It means to speak truthfully, to tell the truth in a way that honors the relationship, meaning you want it to continue. Just blowing up on somebody and telling them what you think, and you say, well, I'm telling you the truth, is not the same thing as speaking honestly, where you honor that person and wanting a future relationship that's better. Speaking boldly and truthfully in a way that's harmful or hurtful is not honesty, it's selfish. It's also important that we be truthful about who we really are in a relationship. We need to be able to communicate who we really are and at the same time receive people in the way that they are. We need to accept and understand who people are and let them be that. That's a key element of truth. But the ultimate principle in stewarding a relationship well, grace and truth, they come together in this ultimate principle, and that's love. In the beginning, you heard in our reading from Romans chapter 13 that love fulfills all the commandments of how we interact with each other. It's simple, really. What exists between two people should be love, a sacrificial interest in what is best for the other person. This is the principle that guides all stewardship in all relationships. It makes being intimate with so many people impossible, but it also makes being intimate with someone kind of scary because you have to sacrifice for their highest good. This also means that you can immediately steward every relationship that comes to you because you can love every person, but it might not be that you can be intimate with all people at the deepest level. But in all relationships, we need to love and care for them. Easy enough, right? Just sacrificial love? Not so much. Unfortunately, no. The reality of sin is that loving another person in the purest sense is impossible for us, really, it seems like. The truth is, sin has trained us to love ourselves more than others. So much of our investment into relationships is really just an act of self-love. Ask yourself, how quickly does our love or your love go away when somebody does something you don't like or something that is hurtful to you? How quickly do we act ugly, or are we willing to be kind of mean when people stop doing the things we want them to do and stop being what we want them to be? How often do we just sacrificially love them? In fact, this is how psychologists now begin describing and defining types of relationships in terms of basically what that person gives you. So how do we solve this problem? Because that's not the way that we steward relationships. Just what do people give us? How do we solve this problem? If selfless love is the only true way for us to really steward the relationships in our life, and selfless love feels impossible, what can we do? Well, we need a power that's greater than us. You see, we build relationships out of our self-love because we still have doubts and fears and holes in our heart that need to be filled. We doubt that we can be accepted, and so we jump on people who say they're willing to accept us. We fear being rejected, and so we love people who promise not to leave us. We have a vacuum in our soul, and we latch onto people who fill those needs and give us purpose and identity. We are using relationships so often to redeem us, or you might say to save us, to give us life. We are poor stewards of relationships because we're asking from our relationships what only Jesus can give us. He gives us a fullness of love that is the ultimate self-sacrifice. We wanted to know we're accepted. Christ proved it on the cross. We wanted to know that we would never be rejected. Christ's resurrection seals that for us. We have needs to be filled in our heart, like purpose and meaning of life and identity. And it's all in Jesus Christ where you find out who you are. In him is a wealth of self-giving that fills us up to the fullness. And once we're full, we'll be ready to steward the gift of relationships in our life because we'll be so full of his love that it will overflow to the people that are around us. So I want to encourage you tonight to start with stewarding your relationship with Christ well, to receive from him the fullness of life that he has to offer, all of his love, all of his grace, all of his acceptance. And as you have your cup filled to the brim and overflowing from his love, the natural thing will be that you will show that love to other people in your life. You will steward relationships well when you have the love of Christ driving you. And if you don't have that love of Christ, we stand ready constantly to help you have the love of Jesus Christ. You just have to reach out, contact us, and let us know if there's any way we can help you. Have a great week. Have the love of Christ and walk faithfully to him.